Welcome back to Painting with Repaint. I'm your host, Billy Osmus, CEO and founder of Repaint Studios. Today we are going to be talking about, is your paint expired, how to tell, and how to safely get rid of it. First things first, you are going to know when your paint is expired. When you open a can of expired paint, it will smell like rotten milk or rotten eggs, sour milk. You will know, and it will reek. It will smell really bad. So if your paint smells like rotten eggs or sour milk, don't even try and mix it. Don't even try and save it, because you're just gonna make your walls stink. Now, we just opened this can of paint. It does have a distinct smell to it, so I would say we shouldn't use this paint. Obviously, it's separated right now, so you know, that's naturally gonna happen with paint anyway. So a good way to be able to tell if you can't really smell anything or get a good idea of whether or not it's expired is start to mix your paint. If it has a hard time mixing and the separation just is not mixing back into the paint, whether you shake it or stir it, that is also a good indicator that your paint has probably expired and you shouldn't use it, because you're not gonna get an even coat on your walls. And also that smell is likely gonna be lingering in the space that you just painted your walls in. So I've got this paint mixed up, and we've been able to kind of mix it in pretty good just to make sure there isn't any separation anymore. There is a slight smell with this paint, but it's not too bad. We could potentially use this paint, but if you're still unsure after you have mixed up your paint and kind of mixed in the separation, just let it sit for like 5 minutes. If your paint is starting to separate even after 5 minutes, then that is also a good indicator that your paint is expired and you should probably get rid of it. So after you stir in your paint and you let it sit for a few minutes to see whether or not it's separated, you're gonna be able to see if it's like really thin and watery. A lot of times I will just pour it into one of our repaint trays and just let it sit there. If it starts to separate rather quickly, or you just see kind of like this oily type residue that is separating away from the colorant, then again, that's likely expired and you don't wanna use it. Another good way to test to see if your paint is expired is if you open the lid and you see any sort of mold or mildew, again, especially if there's a smell, don't use it. Last thing you want is to be painting mold and mildew on your walls, and then you will likely have a bigger problem later on. Okay, so now you've been able to decide whether or not your paint is actually expired, and now you're thinking, what do I do with it? How do I properly dispose of it? Because many times owners will just let their paint can sit in their basement for 10 years, 20 years, and next thing you know, you're buying a home and the previous owners have left gallons and gallons of paint in your basement that's expired, and now you don't know what to do with those either. So once you've determined whether or not your paint is expired, the best way to be able to properly dispose of it is by not throwing it in your trash can. That is not the proper way to be able to dispose of your paint. The best way to properly dispose of it is, a lot of times I will pour it in a repaint tray because my repaint tray is reusable, it's eco-friendly, it's made from a silicone. So I can pour my paint in there that's expired, let it dry, I can peel it out, then I can wash my tray with soap and water, and then I can use it again. If you have a lot of paint that is left over that is expired, like this is, you know, almost a full gallon. Another option is you can either leave it in the can, and if there's enough space, you can pour in some sand or kitty litter. Sometimes a little bit of gravel will help kind of clump it up and make it dry, kind of in a big clump. It'll be like a rock almost. And then you can properly dispose of it that way. Otherwise, another way you can do it is, a lot of times I will pour it into a 5-gallon bucket. I will add kitty litter or any type of sand if you also have that. Sometimes sandbox sand like that you might have for a playground or for kids, that can also work to be able to soak up the paint and all the moisture. Once that clumps up, then you can properly dispose of that into the trash. You cannot dispose of any liquid paint into the trash. That is the improper way to be able to properly dispose of it. The best and safest way is to either drop it off at your local waste management if they take paint. There is also paint recycling or collection sites that you can also drop off paint, and they would be able to properly dispose of anything that's expired. Otherwise, if you have time and you're able to do it, is just let it dry out, properly dispose it, and then you've got an empty paint can that you can either take in for recycling or then dispose in the trash. Keep in mind, this is only for a water-based or an acrylic-based, you know, home paint that you're using in your home. Anything that is oil-based, an oil-based stain, oil-based paint, those those cannot be disposed of in the trash. Those need to be properly brought to a waste management site that they can take those and properly dispose of them. And if you have concerns or you're not really sure what to do, you can call your local waste management and they should be able to direct you in the right direction. Now, the best way to properly store your paint cans, so that way it doesn't expire as fast or get any sort of mold or mildew associated with it, the best way to do this is you want to have it in a cool, dry place. A lot of times they end up in basements. If you have a shelf in a basement or a place that is climate controlled in a closet somewhere, that would be a great place, but make sure it is up on a shelf. One, just for the safety of making sure it's off the floor and away from kids and pets, but also just up on a shelf so that way it's not sitting on any sort of damp concrete floor or any place that might gather any sort of moisture. Another way that you want to make sure it's properly stored is, I know a lot of times these lids can be really difficult to put back on after you've been painting and pouring paint out of it, but the more you can keep this lip a little bit more clean, and then taking a rubber mallet or a hammer, sometimes I honestly just stand on my paint can to be able to properly close this. That's going to make sure you have a better airtight seal to be able to keep that paint fresh for much longer. Thanks for stopping by. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for more videos for painting with repaint.